I don't think I'd be the first to tell you that the live-action Transformers movies aren't exactly, shall we say, good.
Why don't you get a haircut with your bitch ass?
Got a pre-existing juvenile foundational relationship. Statute 2705-3.
What? Texas statute?
I'll burn you so bad you'll wish you died as a child.
Besides the first film back in 2007 and Bumblebee in 2018, none of them have exactly done that much justice to the franchise. I've grown up on Transformers for as long as I can remember, watching the various series like Animated and Prime, so I always had an idea as to what I wanted out of the live-action movies, and Bumblebee was a spark of hope for that need. And after seeing the trailers for Rise of the Beasts, any concerns that I had for the movie sliding back into the Michael Bay style were quickly brushed aside, and my excitement for it grew even more. And I'm happy to say that that excitement wasn't misplaced, because Transformers Rise of the Beasts was actually a good Transformers movie. Of course, it isn't perfect, and it's actually pretty flawed. I mean, this is Transformers we're talking about. But we'll tackle all those problems along the way. Firstly, while the story really isn't that deep, and mostly just boils down to the main characters having to get a thing before the bad guys get the thing, it's serviceable and is clearly laid out. It doesn't go off the rails with major plot lines involving government conspiracies and solely focusing on humans. The movie here is about the Transformers, with humans not taking up too much of the screen time. So that was a massive plus for me. This movie is about the Transformers and doesn't really have that much to do in general with human shenanigans. And it's been way too long since we've had a Transformers movie not focusing that much on the robots themselves. One of the biggest improvements here from the Bay films are the action scenes, since now you can actually tell what the hell is going on. The camera is pulled back enough and steady enough for you to actually see what's going on. Though I will admit you don't get too much of that visceral feeling of excitement from the action in the Bay films here, but that's not that much of a loss. There are quite a few really cool moves pulled off from time to time as well. Unfortunately, the only action scenes here in the film are the ones in the trailer, so there's no big surprises that we didn't see, so it is a little unfortunate. But it is nice that you won't have to squint your eyes every time you want to tell who the hell the bad guys are and who the good guys are. And speaking of which, the actual designs of the Transformers themselves are actually good. Literally everyone, besides poor Wheeljack, oh my god, what did they do to you? Look good. You can actually tell how their faces are supposed to look and what the hell are supposed to be their appendages. I love the fact that the only characters that are supposed to look more alien are the villains, and even they have different color schemes that are distinct enough from each other that you won't get them mixed up. I absolutely love that we're no longer in the gray and black sludge of Transformers that you don't know who's who. And while there may not be much to say about the villains themselves besides their designs being good, since they were just kind of generic and overall serviceable, the Autobots and Maximals have good designs and are actually likable and not terrible and racist.
Take it from my good friend, the Black Transformer, Jazz.
What's cracking, my homies? Jazz gets down with the Ron Nizzle.
Oh my god, does he really talk like that in the movie?
Optimus Prime is finally acting a little more like as he should. Beyond pretty much just being Space Jesus, he actually goes through a small arc in the film, from not exactly liking humans and belonging on Earth, to then accepting Earth as his new home and connecting with humans. It was really nice to see, and something like that has been needed for him for a while. And even years later, it's still great to hear Peter Cullen being able to pull off Optimus and making him sound as commanding as ever. By the end of the movie, Mirage became my favorite character. His positivity and charming dialogue made him a lovable dude. He just came off as one of those friends you'd have who'd always be joking around most of the time, but when something serious happens, would have your back in an instant. The human characters themselves weren't all that interesting. I mean, Noah kinda was, but nothing incredible or super deep. I mean, for the most part, the film did try a little too hard, in my opinion, for you to care about him, but at the same time, he was still likable. And also, since these two weren't any of these,
repeats itself, repeats itself, repeats itself, repeats itself, repeats itself, repeats itself, kick and counter, kick and counter, kick and counter, kick and counter.
I think they're some of the best human characters we've had in these films, so I'm not complaining. And while for the most part the movie was alright, I did have some issues with it, and any of those problems I have can actually be traced back to two specific points: pacing, and the lack of development with the Autobots and Maximals. The movie goes by pretty fast for the most part, and it unfortunately makes a ton of scenes go by much quicker than they should. There are many scenes that went by without enough time being dedicated to them, or others that just had too much time on them. It almost felt as though the movie should have at least been 30 minutes longer in order for everything to play out a little more naturally, or at least for scenes to be cut well enough that certain other ones wouldn't suffer. I already mentioned how I liked the small arc with Optimus Prime and what he goes through, and Mirage being a ton of fun to be around, but that really can't be said about the rest of the Autobots. Like, I really couldn't tell you that much about their personalities or who they are. RC is pretty much just there to be the girl Transformer. Bumblebee doesn't get a ton of screen time, Wheeljack is barely in the movie and doesn't contribute that much besides like one thing, and Stratosphere is literally just the team's Uber. And it's even worse for the Maximals, who show up pretty late into the movie. Even though we get to see Primal and Airazor interact with others, it's certainly not enough, and the others, like Cheetor and Rhinox, are pretty much just there for the action. Like, I'm pretty sure Rhinox didn't even say a single word during the movie. I do think the film should not have had human characters, or at least not focusing on them as much as it did. As much as I thought the leads here were okay, they did take up a lot of screen time from what should have been used on the Autobots, and especially the Maximals. A film being called Rise of the Beasts and not exactly showing the beasts all that much is not really a cool thing to do, and it kinda got a little bit more frustrating, especially when there was a hinted subplot with Primal and Prime, where Primal doesn't really see Optimus as the way that he thought he would be. But the film doesn't go anywhere with that point. It really would have been interesting to explore. And that's kind of always been my issue with the live-action films in general. There's never really been enough of a focus on the Transformers themselves, in terms of characterization. From all the shows I watch, there's always defined traits for each of the characters and personalities to give them. The focus of those is on the Transformers, and the human characters are second. So I guess I just get a little upset whenever the movies don't meet the same heights as those shows have. And oh, before I wrap everything up in this review, I do want to quickly bring up that certain thing that's revealed in the ending almost had me burst out laughing in the theater for how ballsy Hasbro is to attempt it. But if they can pull it off, then I'm not going to complain, and it might actually be pretty cool. But anyways, the best way I can sum up my thoughts on this is by saying, if Bumblebee was a solid reboot of the live-action franchise, then Rise of the Beasts is a good launching point for the series going forward, and a good indication as to what the future may hold. Of course, there's still a couple of kinks that need to be worked out, but for the most part, I think this movie nailed down what I was wanting from a Transformers film. I got decent action, Autobots that are likable, villains who fulfilled their role well enough, human characters that didn't irritate me every second they were on screen, and just left me feeling entertained without feeling guilty, like anytime I watch the Bay films. Honestly, I might be more positive about this than I rightfully should be, but at the same time, I can actually say there's another above-average Transformers movie, and that alone makes me extremely happy and extremely excited. So, without anything else to say, I give Transformers Rise of the Beasts a 7 out of 10.